We're back with some breaking news from overnight. North Korean state TV claims they have successfully conducted, quote, a very important test at a rocket launch site, one that President Trump said was partially closed. This as denuclearization talks between the U.S. and the North begin to sour. President Trump spoke to reporters on the South Lawn just yesterday about his relationship with the North Korean dictator.
I have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. I think we both want to keep it that way. He knows I have an election coming up. I don't think he wants to interfere with that, but we'll have to see.
And then hours later, that announcement from North Korea. NBC's Matt Bradley is following the developments from London. Matt, what do we know about this so-called test that took place?
Yeah, Candace, we don't know much, and we've seen this kind of thing from North Korea before, and in many ways, the political significance and the symbolism outweighs the importance of the technology that the North Koreans put on display here, because, as you mentioned, we don't know what kind of technology they put on display here. We don't know what they fired, whether it was a rocket or a missile or some kind of projectile, but regardless, it's still an ominous sign that North Korea intends to follow through on a threat that it called a Christmas gift, that it intends to deliver, of course, at Christmas, around the end of the year. And experts worry that that could be a threat of launching a new kind or an updated kind of intercontinental ballistic missile. That's one of the primary fears that we have with the North Koreans. Now, the North Koreans have set a deadline for the end of this year for the U.S. to offer what it calls significant concessions for those punishing sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on North Korea. And the North Koreans have always said they don't want to denuclearize unilaterally. They have to release the sanctions. And after New Year's, Pyongyang has said that it could resume its normal activity. That could mean more nuclear tests, more intercontinental ballistic tests, after about a year in which it tested no new nuclear arms. So, so far the U.S. hasn't offered much beyond more glad-handing diplomacy, and there has been some unprecedented, if only symbolic, diplomatic steps under President Trump. So amidst all that, Kim has ramped up his provocations, launching more missile tests, and he seems to be betting that the U.S. president is going to be particularly pliable at this moment because of upcoming U.S. elections. The president had clearly been hoping that he could use North Korea as his only major foreign policy achievement going into this incoming election campaign. Now, with this odd couple breaking down, Candace, it doesn't look like the president has much to offer at all when it comes to North Korea, or really anything in the way of major foreign policy achievements before this election. Candace?
Well, relationships are complicated, whether they're a Facebook one or one with a dictator. Even if he does happen to launch this ICBM by Christmas, do we have any sense of what that would do diplomatically between the relations between the U.S. and North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a self-imposed moratorium on launching nuclear weapons. The ICBM is also part of that, and it would be it would really put the relationship on more of the skids than it is now. But it's more because, of course, the U.S. has been begging and begging for the last year to have more denuclearization talks with the North Koreans, and the North Koreans have refused the entire time. So, it's not really clear that this relationship could sink any further than it already has. So I don't really see how a new test would necessarily damage relations between Pyongyang and Washington any more than they're already damaged.
All right,
Candace?
Matt Bradley joining us from London. Appreciate it, Matt.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.